Suppose he refuses to sell me any dope, she thought anxiously. The thought of buying some dope had been just a notion before, but now, faced with the problem of maybe not copping, it became a driving force. She just had to cop some drugs now. "I was so sure Teddy would be here," she said, and turned on her most captivating smile. Her teeth had a dazzling whiteness about them, and, combined with her incomparable complexion, the smile was an enchanting weapon that had captured stronger men than Porky. "Really, Porky, I didn't even bother to look for my car," she added. "I was so sure he was here." Porky had seen the anxiety in her eyes, though. Before his knees gave him away, he stepped towards the door and pretended to get ready to close it on her. "If he comes by Terry, I'll tell him you stopped by looking for him." Now the idea of having a blow became all-consuming. The very thought of being turned away, without being allowed to buy some stuff, filled her with dread. She clutched at the door desperately. She had never entertained the thought that he might not sell her a blow. She blocked the door with a small body. "I was thinking about wasting a few dollars on a blow for myself, Porky." She wet her lips and rushed on. "Unless you have some reason for not wanting to sell me some dope." She stared up at him and moved closer, not really aware of what she was doing. Though he had expected it and waited for this minute, the words coming from her sounded like a dream come true. Porky could hardly believe his eyes and ears. This was what he had been waiting for. At long last, Miss High and Mighty had been brought to her knees. All her ladylike behavior from the past would now be shattered, and he'd have the opportunity to watch her fall. With difficulty, he managed to conceal his pleasure. "Why, by all means, girlie. You should know your money is good at my house. Ain't I been giving you a blow whenever you wanted one these past few days?" He stared down at her as though he were a confessional preacher. His face was full of compassion and understanding. A few of the addicts sitting around the apartment glanced up. The byplay of words hadn't shot past them. All of them knew just what Porky was working out of. Minnie, a thin, short, brown-skinned dope fiend, in her late 20s, watched Porky with anger. She was well aware that he was playing with Terry. It seemed like a replay out of her past. The only difference was that it was a different pusher, but the same technique. Once they realized you really had a yen for the stuff, the free samples began to come to an end. When she had first started using, the pushers used to call her up so she could come over and sample the dope they had just got in. They used to ask her to test it for them, as though she really knew what she was sampling. Minnie stared at Porky, her eyes glittering. She knew he wasn't stringing Terry out for the sake of another customer either. When it concerned a young, attractive girl, sex was the hidden key in the background of his warped mind. "Don't just stand there, girl. Come on in," Porky ordered, standing in the doorway in such a way that she would have to squeeze against his huge stomach if she wanted to come in. He could feel her softness as she went by. He tried to press against her tightly while he reached out and rubbed her ass, making it seem as though it was a friendly pat. "How much money was you planning on spending?" he inquired as he walked closely behind her. Her short, light skirt fitted her tightly across the rear, and her legs were bowed enough to give her a very sexual look when she walked. Terry opened her purse and counted the few dollars there, pushing back the $5 bill so that he wouldn't see it. "I've got about $3, Porky. Counting the little change I've got." "Damn!" she cursed. "I thought I had more than that," she said sweetly, playing on his lust. She could still feel the impression of his hand on her butt, and she planned on making him pay for that free feel. He grunted. "You know that ain't enough money to get no stuff with, girl." He sat down and patted the arm of the chair. "Come over here and sit down, Terry, while I try and figure out what we can do for you, short money and all." His fertile brain began to scheme. He didn't want to push it too fast, but this was an opportunity that didn't come to his house every day. Actually, this was the first time she had ever come to his pad without Teddy, and he didn't want to blow it. In the back of his mind, a small voice kept warning him not to rush. He had all the time in the world, because if she came once alone, she would come back again. if she wasn't frightened too bad. He wet his lips slowly, trying to decide what course to take. Minnie spoke up before he could make up his mind. "I put in the rest of the money with you, Terry, if you don't mind sharing a pack of stuff with me." Porky shot her a villainous glance, full of the promise of vengeance. He couldn't quite succeed in masking his anger at being temporarily thwarted, but he managed a slight grin. "By all means, you get together and pool up on one of those $10 packs." He stared at Minnie meaningfully. "I guess you know we done run out of $5 bags." He grinned ruthlessly. He knew Minnie hadn't planned on buying anything higher than a $5 pack. Minnie reached in her bra and removed some crumpled $1 bills. She counted the money out to Terry. With her back turned to Porky, Terry removed the $5 bill and showed it to Minnie. Both girls grinned at each other. After they pooled up the money, Terry took the money over and dropped it in Porky's fat lap. Porky stared at the money in his lap as though it were a snake someone had tossed on him. "Smokey!" he yelled, his voice ringing loudly in the flat. "Bitch, don't you never put no money on me no more." He yelled harshly at Terry, his voice carrying a note of fear. Like many pushers, Porky made it a point never to sell any drugs directly to an addict. Either his woman or one of his doormen always made the sale. Porky even refused to touch any of the money, believing that if a bus went down with phony money, his hands would not light up if they ran tests on him at the police station. Smokey came slowly into the room. She was wearing only a short half-slip and bra. She picked up the money quickly and counted it, making sure Minnie hadn't tried to shortchange them. She stared coldly at Terry out of half-closed eyes. There was contempt in her look. She despised women like Terry. She considered them as pampered bitches, never having really experienced any of the hardships of life. She remembered how it had been when she first met Porky. He was a small-time pusher, and she had come to his house broke and sick. He had taken her in, given her a place to stay, and enough dope to get her drug sickness off, then enough money to go to the doctor the next day. It had taken 2 weeks before the female trouble she had disappeared, and all that time, Porky supported her. It was the first time in her life anyone had ever been kind to her. "Is it all there, baby?" Porky asked, hoping in his heart that they were short. When Smokey nodded, he removed 2 $10 bags from his shirt pocket and gave one to Smokey. Smokey counted the money again, then took the pack and held it out to Terry. Before Terry could take the dope and walk away, Porky grabbed her arm and pulled her close. His breath was strong and hot as his yellowish teeth grinned up at her. "You take this other pack, Terry, and use it to wake up on." He pushed the other package of dope into her hand as she tried to pull away. He rubbed her arm slowly. A feeling of revulsion shook her as she felt his sweaty fingers caress her arm intimately, but it didn't occur to her to refuse the heroin. "Let's go over to my place and do this stuff up, Terry," Minnie said as she stood up. "That way we can get comfortable and relax without worrying about some freak trying to look under our skirts." Her open scorn had a strange effect on Porky. Instead of becoming angry, he became aroused. His breathing became heavy, and he stared at her with open hostility. "One of these days, bitch," he stated meaningfully, "you're going to overload your smart ass, and I'll be there to see it happen." The thought of Terry leaving before he could see her nod made him angry. There was genuine hatred in Minnie's eyes as she stared back at him. "Not living, nigga. As long as there are tricks in the street, I'll never put myself down so low as to have to ask you for any kind of favor," she continued, her voice dripping venom. "And if you think I give a fuck about buying my dope from you, forget it. I spend $50 a day every day, so I don't have to kiss nobody's ass to get them to accept my money. You know as well as I know, there are too many dealers in Detroit for me to have to get down on my knees to your fat ass. So whenever you feel as if you don't want my business, don't bite your tongue." Smokey had started back towards the bedroom, but stopped to listen to Minnie. "Tell that wise-ass bitch to take her business somewhere else, then," she yelled to Porky. "Like we really give a fuck about her funky $50. Porky hesitated for a brief minute. He didn't want to say something while he was angry that he would regret. She was a good customer, true enough, But $50 didn't mean shit to a man who had the business he had. If he put her up for keeps, he'd never have the chance to see her when she became sick, and he had no doubt about her one day having to come to him for help. Not if she kept using. And he was sure she'd continue using until the day she was arrested or the day they put dirt on top of her. He had put up with her sharp tongue now for over a year, so it shouldn't be too hard to put up with it for at least 6 more months. With her being pregnant, it shouldn't take that long. When the day did come, when she came begging him to take her to bed, he'd laugh in her face, and then make her perform with one of his dogs. The very thought of it was enough to cool down his anger.